All right, today I'm going to start talking about composition, which is a huge topic, wonderful and interesting one, but like anatomy, it's something that you can study your whole life and still learn things about and be surprised by. We'll do the best we can in a short period of time to try to get across some important ideas about composition to you. So first, what is composition? I think every artist has their own idea or pet definition of what composition is. For me, what being an artist means is sort of boils down to being able to convey a particular idea that I have about either what I'm looking at or what I'm thinking about. How do I convey that to the viewer? And so me, composition is a graphic interpretation of that idea or a graphic rendering of that idea. It's how do I translate that idea that I have to a piece of paper or to a to clay or to whatever it is that I'm working in. So it's a really important drawing idea, obviously, and it really boils down to sort of expression. But even before we get to expression, there are certain graphic implications, some groundwork that we have to understand about composition in order to make it work for us so that we can use it to express an idea. There are just certain graphic truths that aren't necessarily out there in nature that you see that really pertain to working on a piece of paper or sculpting or whatever it is. So we have to kind of learn those and come to terms with them so that we can use the principles of composition to help us express that idea that we have. And if you go to design books, you'll see a lot of those principles expressed, ideas like balance and focal point and, working in a symmetrical way or asymmetrical way or rhythm. All of those things are very important compositional principles that kind of apply across the board to whatever, however you're working. It doesn't matter if you're a realist or an abstract painter. There's certain foundation principles about composition that we have to understand in order to use them to convey our idea or use them well. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to focus on just one of those ideas, keep it simple. It's the one that I think the most about and I feel is the most important. And in design books, it goes by the sort of uninteresting name of unity. But to me, I think of it as unity as a kind of connectivity about how seeing at the beginning how everything is similar, how everything is joining and connected and related to one another first. Because at the end of the day, in order for people to look at your page and to be able to grasp the idea, they have to be able to, they have to want to look at what you're doing. And if everything feels like it fits together and goes together and is connected and related to one another, all the shapes and tones and colors and so forth, then they're going to be able to, they're going to have a better chance of actually understanding what your idea is because they'll want to look at it. So again, there's certain just kind of graphic truths that we want to avail ourselves of. Like how do we get people to stand in front of our paper and sort of look at what we're trying to convey to them? So the idea of unity or connectivity is, to me, is of paramount importance. So what I'm going to do first is just a very simple exercise that I'm going to have you guys do that's about starting with line and thinking about line as a connective idea. So I've got a still life set up here, and I'm going to, excuse me, I'm going to do a drawing of that still life. But I'm going to do it in a particular way. That's not necessarily how it's not a method of working necessarily. It's not how I work, but it's more about how you should be thinking about what you're looking at. So at the beginning of this class, we talked a lot about straight lines and individual objects and so forth. And in composition, you can't really think that way. You have to think in terms of more organic lines about how lines are sort of moving and connecting different objects and not seeing one object and then another. So I know it's very different from what we've talked about, but when you get to composing a grouping, you want to think about how everything is related. And the most simplest plane that we can kind of think on at the beginning is lines. So how are lines related to one another? So the first line that we want to think about in composition is the boundary to our picture. So it's really difficult to really think about composition in a legitimate way if you're not thinking about a rectangle. Now the rectangle can change over the course of your composition. You're not stuck with it, but it's always good to start with a rectangle. So you should make yourself something like this, which it's two L shapes. So this is a viewfinder. Just cut it out of the back of an old drawing pad, a couple pieces of cardboard. Because when we look at nature, nature's not sort of framed for us, right? So it's really helpful if we want to think of something in terms of a rectangle to actually create a rectangle that we can see what we're going to draw through. And we can manipulate the scale of this rectangle. We can make a square, or a long rectangle, or a horizontal or a vertical rectangle. All right, so it's really useful in helping to visualize how we're going to take nature out there and put it onto this flat plane, and how it's going to organize within a boundary, because that's what we're going to end up with. We're going to have to end up with some kind of a boundary. So it's good to start with one. All right. So so when I look up here at this still life, I'm going to create a boundary here, just really simply. And I've kind of visualized how things are going to fit inside of that boundary. And it's really good with these exercises that I'm giving you to think about cropping what you're looking at. Because when we crop, what we do is we kind of take emphasis off individual objects. And we see things more as just part of a whole pattern or grouping, right? And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a line that's connecting everything. And I'm actually not going to take my Conte crayon off the surface of the page when I do this. So it's going to be this search, and you won't get something that's super naturalistic, but it's just giving you the feeling of, okay, I'm starting here with this bottle, and I'm moving to that block, and then the pear is going to be over here, and that pear, the purple board underneath the pear sort of takes me back to this bottle over here, which goes up, and I'm cropping the blue lemon that's on top of that bottle. The bottle, I see the bottom of the bottle over here. Here's a white piece of paper against the ground plane back there. That continues over here to this cup, which is cropped over here, which hits the apple here, and then back down to this bottle. And I might just move my picture plane down a little bit. So I'm doing this whole thing without taking the Conte off the paper. And I'm trying to treat everything in a similar way. So in terms of line weight, I'm not stopping to put any details in. I'm just, if I have to get back to something, I take some pathway back to it. I'm not going to lift my drawing utensil. And again, I'm not going to end up with anything that's naturalistic, but it's just giving me the feel of how everything is related, everything is connected to one another. Okay. So we're going to do a number of these just to get the feel of it. And if you end up with a mess, don't worry about it. It's more about the feeling of just seeing how everything is sort of connected, and it's all connecting to the edge of this rectangle. So when you do it, don't just sort of stay inside. Make a point of getting outside and touching the edge of your rectangle.